This year, however, looks to be very different because it's looking almost certain that it will be won by one of two Japanese cars, either a Nissan Bluebird Turbo or perhaps a Mazda Wankel RX-7. The Wankel of Alan Moffat has the speed of every car on the track, and already today in the first practice session he looks to have sewn up pole position. But last weekend we saw a pit stop because Alan said that he had to run very light fuel load to make the car competitive up the hill at Wanneroo. That was a ploy that most of the other teams feel was just that, no more than a ploy. They say it wasn't necessary at all and wouldn't have benefited him at all and was used by him to influence Cams to give him more advantages in running his car and perhaps to give him a later, more powerful 13B specification Wankel engine. Alan Grice, for instance, says that Moffat laid a 61-metre strip of rubber when he came out of the pits, and that it was only 61 metres because he had to pick up second gear. Peter Brock's team say 35 pounds weight of fuel makes absolutely no difference, and they quote that his fastest lap in the first session was lap 4, and the first 2 laps after his refuel were his 2 fastest in the race. The Nissan team say that 35 pounds of fuel is about 1% of the total load of the car and couldn't possibly influence the outright result. So he has the measure of the cars on the track, but does he have it in the point score? And that's what we're going to find out this weekend at Adelaide Raceway as they go into round 5.
A 57.4 second unofficial lap, Alan. That's 0.3 under your pole position qualifying time last year, and 1.3 under the record, 1.6 under the record. Must feel good.
Well, we're very competitive here, John. The corners are quite quick, and I can keep my revs up, and provided we have the car handling and it doesn't scare me too much, I can get onto the front straight. That doesn't really mean that we're going to be all that effective in the race. I mean, we're competitive. But a lap time is just an elapsed time, and it's where you do it that counts. So if the other blokes are going down the straights, not twice as fast, but certainly faster, then it is still an effort to catch up. It doesn't matter what your lap time is. All that lap time says is that they shouldn't get too far away from me in the race. It doesn't mean that I've got the ability to lead it.
Off the start tomorrow, can the V8s beat you in the drag race to the first?
Well, that's what we're concerned about. I have to get an absolutely terrific start, and after the one in Perth, perhaps maybe I can. And being on the front row, naturally, you're not giving away any yardage to anybody else, so it is a genuine drag down into the genuine drag race down into the top first corner. That'll be interesting. That'll add a little spice to the race.
And there's the team that we're talking about, the man in charge, the Canadian-born Alan Moffat, whose start at Wanneroo was absolutely electric. As Howard Marsden of the Nissan team says, he's now showing a lot more confidence in the strength of the transmission of that car than they used to show. It was one of the weaker points of the car and had to be treated fairly gingerly off the start line. But Alan Moffat gave it everything at Wanneroo, obviously because he had to get a good start to be able to mix it with and, if possible, get in front of the V8s before he made his pit stop. So it gave him very little time. But the car really lacks for very little at any point of the circuit. And that's the point that's now starting to needle a lot of the V8 drivers, particularly the Marlborough Holden dealer team. It's really getting under their skin, and particularly Peter Brock. Peter Brock at Wanneroo last weekend and here at Adelaide Raceway has really been privately opening out about what he thinks about Alan Moffat, car 43, whether it should be classified as a touring car. And this is the man that's having a fairly hard time of it at the moment. Some wonderful quick laps on some new Dunlops at the end of practice at last weekend. Saw Brock grab pole position, but we saw a very rare spin from him, you'll remember, late in the race, and he finally came home ninth. And earlier today we were talking with the man that's won 6 Bathursts and 3 Australian Touring Car Championships.
Peter Brock, after your brake lock up at Wanneroo last weekend, you went fishing. Did you catch anything?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we got into quite a lot of fish, mainly Spanish mackerel, quite a few tuna and snapper and coral trout and all sorts of things.
But you've only just arrived at the circuit here. You must be fairly confident of the car's condition.
Well, I figured that the way it was at Adelaide, at Wanneroo, that it was very, very close to being right for Adelaide, because both circuits have corners where you require very good turning. They're both circuits with long corners. We did get the car turning in very, very well, and Larry had assured me that the car was steering well. I went out early this morning with just some old tyres on, did 3 or 4 laps, and I honestly came in and said, look, I don't think there's a great deal we can do to it. It's about as good as we're going to get it.
Well, you're a second under the record, but you're still 0.6 of a second outside Moffat. Do you have an answer for him here?
No, all I can assume is that Moffat won't be able to go that fast with race tyres. I only can hope that. His car has been very, very quick at this circuit. Then again, you know, off the line and the load of fuel and everything else, it seems to even things out a little. But it's going to be a very, very close affair, I'm sure of that.
Young David Parsons is a dairy farmer down in Tasmania and very much doing it on a limited budget. He was helped across to Wanneroo by Warren Cullen. And we were talking to him earlier today after he's brought back to Adelaide Raceway by Warren Cullen's transporter.
David, 10th in the series isn't bad without a real sponsor or any real money to back you.
Yeah, that's true. It's been a bit of a struggle, but I suppose we'll get there one day.
Well, why are you persevering?
Well, it's a bit of a challenge. It's just one of those things. I like a bit of a challenge, and it's sort of in me blood a little bit, and I just love it.
You won Rookie of the Year at Bathurst last year. You've been nominated by one of the motoring magazines as being the find of 1982, and yet you're still back in the pack. It must be frustrating.
It certainly is. Yeah, as far as sponsorship and that goes, there's a lot of top drivers around that haven't got sponsorship, and it's awfully hard for a young fella that's started off to get sponsorship, and also you've got to actually do the experience, and it's hard to put a old head on young shoulders.
George Fury is the man that's leading the championship and who's done a very good time earlier today, only one car faster than he, and that is the Alan Moffat Mazda. And George is smiling, playing it very much to team orders from team manager Howard Marsden, but in a very good position in the championship if he keeps his head as the series rolls on. We were talking to him earlier.
George, you're only 5 points ahead of Alan Moffat on corrected points. It's going to be very close here at Adelaide.
Well, corrected points, you mean if we're in the same class as Alan Moffat, which we're not. We're in a 3-litre class.
You still maintain you're not racing for the Australian Touring Car Championship outright?
Well, we'd like to win it outright, but the fact of the matter is that we're in the 3-litre class, and it is a 3-litre car, and we'll be very happy if we can win it under those circumstances.
Nonetheless, the Adelaide circuit suits your car better than probably any other track in Australia. Surely you must be an outright contender here.
Well, we hope so, John. We've put in a lot of hard work on the car, and it's getting better and better. Alan Moffat's little sports car sort of beaten us for the time today, but I think we're going to be able to be circulating at a much better pace than we were here last year.
What's the technique against the V8s at Adelaide?
Well, the technique is, I suppose, that they go out pretty fast at the start, and we just sit there behind them for a while, and then hopefully their tyres and everything warm up, and we catch up with them.
Fury's in a great position in the championship. He really has just got to run steadily, and it all should fall into place for him, because if he comes second at each of the remaining rounds and Moffat wins them all, Fury will win the series by 13 points, joining Colin Bond as the only man or the only two people to have won both an Australian Rally Championship and also a Touring Car Championship. And the nice thing about it, although he's only been racing a couple of years, is that he does exactly what Howard Marsden tells him. He really does run very much to team orders, which is fairly vital in sorting out the turbocharged Bluebird. Alan Grice has had a bit of a disappointing series. It's shown a lot of promise, 2 first places in the 2 races that he's finished, retired from Calder and then retired fairly early on last weekend again at Wanneroo, and that was fairly disappointing for the guy who in a new team this year is brimful of confidence and enthusiasm, as we found earlier today.
Alan Grice, 2 firsts and 2 did not finishes so far in the Australian Touring Car Championship. It's either crash or win, isn't it?
It's not as simple as that. We haven't had any crashes. What we've had is, the last one was a little standard component that cost about 0.8% that blocked up and didn't allow the water system to breathe at all. So it built up enormous pressure and actually stretched the radiator. It was one of the things, but ultimately pumped all its water out and then got extremely hot. So that was that one.
Effectively, though, you're about 1 race behind Alan Moffat's Mazda now in the points table. Can you make it up?
We're playing the races one by one and treating them as they come. We're not all that concerned at this point of time. We're into the 5th, but it's still halfway. You can have the same amount of results in the second half. But, you know, that's a very hard motor car to beat. I think that's a favourite to win the sports car championship.
Is it beatable here at Adelaide?
It's beatable anywhere.
So as Alan Grice comes slowly back into the pits in one of the 2 STP Roadways Holden Commodores, he wonders if he can improve his grid position very much from the 4th position he's in at the moment. Part of the long straight at Adelaide Raceway, which is also used as a drag strip and is therefore 1 kilometre long as Peter Brock goes through, and Dick Johnson, another part of the circuit, has the Falcon in full flight. Big, slightly unwieldy car, an enormous amount of power, 5.8 litres. And as somebody said, he doesn't have to be very quick into the corners as 5G there. You saw Dick actually squealed his tyres going into that corner there and ran wide, as you could see, onto the curbing. And this is one of Dick's magic practice laps where, with a clear track and early in the session, he gives it everything, sails it out towards the fence, fully committed, and still bright and cheerful, although, as we heard earlier today, things aren't going quite as well as he'd like.
Dick Johnson, the leading V8 in the series, but only with 2/3 and a 5th. That's not the way you like to win.
No, it's a far cry from last year, but then again, I think the technology has sort of caught up with a lot of people. Last year it was basically a 2-car race, and this year it's about a 5 or 6-car race.
Is there anything left in the Falcon? Is there any development there?
Well, bear in mind that the poor old Falcon's been developed since 1971-72 when the first HOs came out, and we basically have the same engine. The chassis is virtually the same except for the rear end, but other than that I said, well, we'll just have to keep trying to find new things that sort of make us go a little bit quicker.
Well, after this race you get on home ground up at Surfers Paradise. Is that going to help you?
I think the crowd might help me a little bit. But we'll do a lot of testing before Surfers Paradise and see if we can bring the thing out of the woodwork up there.
Last year you won the race here and you gave Moffat a hard time all the way until he slipped off the track. Is that the tactic tomorrow?
I don't mind how many of them in front of me slip off the track at all. It makes it a little bit easier. Actually, I thought that last weekend I might have been close to having a win there after I saw the replay, but unfortunately it didn't happen that way. But we'll give it our best tomorrow and just see where we end up at the end.
Dick always does give it his best, and in fact that's going to be the case with a lot of the V8s, because they're well down now in the point score, so their only opportunity is really to optimise every race and to play interference to people like George Fury there, the only person in the front runners to have scored in all 4 rounds. Alan Moffat, who's dropped 1 round at Sandown when he broke his axle only 3 laps from the end and went thrusting for the lead. Steve Harrington, who's there very much by dint of consistency rather than great positions at any particular round. Johnson, you can see, has had a number of good placings. Alan Grice back in 5th place, but with 2 wins. If he improved his finish rate, he'd be very much better off. Murray Carter's pulled out, wasn't at Wanneroo and isn't here. Laurie Nelson has come here with his 3-litre Capri, planning perhaps to get a 5-litre Mustang from America for later this season or next. Cullen's here, Brock, of course, Parsons and Clive Benson-Brown, all fronting here at Adelaide. So the man in charge of the team that leads the championship, and George Fury, his lead driver, who has 99 points, is Howard Marsden, who formerly managed Alan Moffat and doing a very good job on running the Nissan team entry. And I was talking to him earlier today about the situation with small cars and their potential for the future. Howard Marsden, you've campaigned the big V8 Fords with Alan Moffat, and now you're campaigning the Nissan Bluebirds. Does this indicate that the time left for the V8s is very short?
Yes, it's very good that motor racing, in fact, does tend to channel the same movements on the road as we've got on the racetracks. V8s are dying on the road, they're dying on the racetracks.
What's the problem with them as a race car?
Weight. The sheer momentum of carrying that sort of weight around is just too much. It's hard on the brakes, it's hard on the tyres, fuel consumption is off, the drivers get tired. It's really got very little going for it.
On the other hand, you haven't yet won a race, have you, with the Bluebird Turbo?
No, there's another little round sports car doing much too well to let us win the odd race here and there. We're getting better. We're having to condense an awful lot of development over these past 20 months now to be in the position we are in at the moment. We feel there are wins coming down the line.
So how would you foresee the scene, say, by Bathurst this year and then next year?
Bathurst this year, I think that you'd have to, on paper, put your money, in fact, back onto the Commodores and to some extent the Falcons. There's nothing like that big power to carry you up the mountain. Down the mountain, across the top of the mountain, the little cars are just as good. But they have that ability to climb the mountain. It's the only proper mountain in motor racing in this country. So maybe that's the last stamping ground of the V8s.
You're a 1.8-litre turbo, but of course you've got bigger turbo motors in the Nissan stable. Might you switch to a bigger motor and a different car?
Yes, we expect that very soon now we'll make the choice to a different vehicle, but maybe not until 1985.
And how soon do you think before a win comes along?
Well, maybe you'll be in a position to ask me that question after this weekend, Will.
A lot of argument this year in the Touring Car Championship about the basis on which the point score is formulated, because there's a different scale of points for each of the two classes. An under 3-litre car gets more points for any particular finishing position than an over 3-litre car gets, and some people say that this is handed it to George Fury on a plate. If we, in fact, have a look at the way that it would have been scored on the basis of previous years, up until the end of last year, but for many years before that, this is the situation. Now, there's, in the first column, is the situation as it is at the moment. And remembering that George Fury eventually has to drop around. He can score only 7 out of 8, and at the moment he's scoring 4 out of 4 to have 99. Dropping 1 would bring him back to 78, so Moffat's not really very far behind him. On last year's basis, he'd be on 45 points with Moffat, a long way in arrears on 24, because that's without Fury dropping a point score. If he dropped 13, it would bring him back to 32, still with a bigger margin than he has over Moffat at the moment. You see, further down we'd come to Grice in third place. Laurie Nelson in a class car, 16 would be in fourth. So the situation would be greatly altered, but it wouldn't be very different in terms of the outright situation than it is now. So we can conclude that the point score situation is fairly satisfactory as it's formulated this year.
There'll be 30 laps of the General Credits Cup for Formula 2 cars tomorrow, but the big race is the Mazda 100, the Australian Touring Car Championship. And on pole position is Alan Moffat on 57.4 seconds. The top 5 cars are all under Peter Brock's lap record. George Fury and Peter Brock are tied for second place on 57.8 seconds. Then comes Alan Grice on 58 seconds. Then Dick Johnson, 58.4. Alan Moffat set his fastest lap on the third of only 5 laps, indicating just how competitive that Mazda is tomorrow. But the man to watch really, as well as Moffat, will be George Fury, because this fast Adelaide circuit really does suit the smaller cars like the Nissan Bluebird and the Mazda RX-7. ABC Sport will begin its telecast tomorrow afternoon at 3:35 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and at 10:50 p.m. Central Standard Time tomorrow night in Adelaide. This is John Smailes on behalf of Will Hagon for ABC Sport.
And we're only a couple of minutes away from a start. Our commentators today are Will Hagon and John Smailes.
as Alan Moffat pulls up over Drew Morfett's left shoulder onto pole position for what should be a sensational fifth round, the start of the second bracket, the second half of the Australian Touring Car Championship, and that's the way they qualified yesterday. Alan Moffat, 57.4, 3/10 better than his best time last year here. George Fury, 2 seconds better than his best time a year ago. Peter Brock, only 1 second, that's right, better than his previous best. Alan Grice not far behind him, 2/10. Dick Johnson could wring nothing more from the Falcon than 58.4. Steve Harrington, who's lying third in the series with great consistency, finishing all 4 races, a 58.9, quite a good time for him. And the privateer from Tasmania, David Parsons, a good time, 59.4 also. Jim Keogh, in a car new to him, Peter Brock's Bathurst 1980 winning car rebuilt. So that's the way the leading 10 shape up for this 40-lap, 96.5 kilometre, 5th round of the Australian Touring Car Championship. That's a 3-2-3 grid situation. So Alan Moffat, George Fury to his left, Peter Brock to his left.
The lap record, 59 seconds. The top 6 cars under that record in practice yesterday. 1.5 seconds separates the top 6 cars on the grid.
Second row of the grid, Grice and Dick Johnson, V8 Commodore and V8 Falcon. Third row of the grid, Steve Harrington, Commodore, Parsons, Commodore, Stack, Commodore. Fourth row is Keogh and Harrop. Fifth row, Benson Brown. Wilmington is missing, blew an engine yesterday and has gone home. Andrew Harris. Then Wilson, Parmenter and White. Graham Treasure and Manson down at the tail end of a 17-car grid. All in readiness. Great tension here on a very fine day and a big crowd. As they blast away, Fury getting a bit sideways and not getting away very well, but Brock jumped beautifully. And it's Brock from Moffat. And look at the gap, though, that a good start has given Brock on the remainder of the field.
Here comes
Johnson now, Grice it is, barging his way through. Fury 4th, Harrington 6th. That's Cullen 22, outside Parsons 50.
Brock from Moffat. Grice, Fury. Steve Harrington in 5th position.
Well,
Harrington was smoking badly when he came onto the bowl as well. Right behind him is David Parsons.
Moffat has nothing to complain about with that electrifying start, slotting him into second place ahead of all but one of the cars that should be able to let him off early in the race down the straight. Fury, the series leader, will be a little bit more disappointed.
There goes Grice, past Moffat.
And talking to Alan Grice in the form-up area earlier, I said, "You will mix it with them, won't you, and make life uncomfortable for the little ones?" And he said, "Oh, all right," with a grin all over his face. He loves the strap. David Parsons in car number 50 has come to a halt. Very bad luck for a man. He's banged the back of it very hard, as you can see there. And very bad luck because the Tasmanian privateer has very little money to spare and so far has done very well in the series. A 59.82 and about a second and a bit quicker than that, the second lap for Brock. 59.82 is his standing lap. So Brock in the position that he and Grice must assert on the little cars, which running softer compound Dunlop tyres with better grip, but also putting much less heat into them through the race, will be in better condition by the end of 40 laps. This is the longest of all the touring car rounds so far, 96.5 kilometres. All the others have been just around the minimum required of 80.
Steve Harrington moves up to the 5th position, and behind him Dick Johnson in the first of the Ford Falcons. Brock now extending his lead off the bowl, working hard to keep the pressure off his tyres because the tyres have to last in good condition for 40 laps. And Brock knows just how difficult that is in the heat of Adelaide International Raceway.
58.5, that lap for Brock. Moffat, though, Grice at least, with pressure on him from both Moffat and Fury.
58.5, of course, is 0.5 of a second under Brock's existing lap record, so that's the pace of the race.
On full tank.
Moffat looking for a way all the way through Grice.
There's no suggestion of the tactic employed by Moffat last weekend of an electrifying pit stop. No need for it, nor does the pit arrangement at Adelaide Raceway suit it. So we do not expect to see that again.
Nonetheless, the Peter Stuyvesant Moffat team have judged their fuel load so keenly that they estimate they'll finish with about 1 litre of fuel left in the tank.
Harrington, Dick Johnson, 5th and 6th. Cullen in 22. The car qualified yesterday by Ron Harrop, 10th grid position. Johnson bucking around in the big Ford that got a great cheer from the crowd when he brought it out onto the grid. He and that car really invoked more loyal devotion from the fans than most other brands. Brock, Grice, Moffat, Fury. Onto the bowl for the 5th time. 35 laps remaining.
Fury trying now on Moffat.
And I would think he might just, no. A wily Moffat saw that, but that's interesting, isn't it? Moffat a 57.4 in practices. Fury worked much harder and longer to do a 57.8. But having a real probe at Alan Moffat.
Peter Brock, 1.18 seconds in front of the great scrap for second position between Grice, Moffat and Fury, and this circuit of all of them really suiting the smaller cars of Alan Moffat and George Fury, if only they can get a clean run.
Coming up the lap, tail ender in a Capri already, a 1.3 second lead over Grice, who's pulling out to about 6/10 on Moffat and a whisker or a blink of an eye on Fury. And they come by the very slow car 48, the Isuzu of Jeff Manson, which frankly at the pace he's going, being lapped after 6 laps, has very little place in the race.
Moffat having to work really hard to try and shake Fury off his tail, and Fury ducks to the outside, won't do it under brakes, but Moffat is in real jeopardy from Fury. The gap, 1st to 4th position, is 2.21 seconds.
This the scrap behind the 2 Commodores of Brock and Grice.
News through, as we obviously can see from the pace of this race, that all 4 cars dicing for the lead have all broken Peter Brock's lap record.
And of course the one in 3rd place, Alan Moffat, took his first pole position in the 5 rounds of this year's Touring Car Championship here yesterday. Pole had previously been taken twice by Grice, twice by Brock. But Moffat, what he has done, has won several races.
First car into the pits is Steve Harrington, the 22-year-old, just turned 22 in fact on Friday, number 2 driver in the STP Roadways team. He's been locking up a front left-hand wheel coming onto the bowl, and Harrington obviously learning his trade at this stage and not prepared to stay out there for another 33 laps without having the problem rectified.
Moffat, of course, won the first round and the last round, Calder and Wanneroo, and he has taken lap records at Sandown, Simmons Plains and Wanneroo. The outright touring car lap record at each of those circuits, as Moffat presses Grice, flies to that van in car 43, probing his way on a Commodore, which in the first 3 rounds was more than the equal of Peter Brock, but is not that at this moment today.
Brock extends his lead to 2.06 seconds.
John White, car 65, about to be lapped by Brock. The car some 8 seconds slower than Brock's best practice time. Good stuff, great pressure from Moffat, who knows the value of doing that, particularly after last weekend when Peter Brock just went too deep and too late, braking at the tight switchback corner at the top of the hill at Wanneroo and spun. And on the other hand, Fury knows the benefit too of sitting in behind a person as experienced in touring cars as Alan Moffat.
Now, Moffat up alongside Grice.
Brock, you saw him get onto the picks there as the car...
And it's Moffat.
Down a bit.
Grice re-challenging. Oh, touched him. Moffat all over the track.
And Greisel.
And here comes Cheeky Fury looking for a way through.
Grice getting ready to do a real panel bending argument here. And he saw some determination there, particularly the car in front has little to lose. He knows he'll be worse off at the end than the car he's battling against. And I don't think if Alan Moffat wants to play rough, and I'm not suggesting he was, but if he wanted to continue that, then I think Alan Grice would be very happy to do so.
1/4 distance now for Peter Brock, 10 laps down, 30 remaining. As Alan Moffat again ranges alongside Grice down the chute. And this time under brakes it'll be the same thing again.
Fury was saying he was actually laughing for about 2 or 3 laps at Wanneroo as he watched Brock and Moffat wring each other's necks. And the persistent Alan Grice, about 1 minute later, reckons he's just about solved the problem of Alan Grice. And George Fury now starts to think about his dealing with Grice. There's the twice Australian rally champion with only 2 years in road racing, and what a tremendous job he's done. And so too is his mentor, Howard Marsden, who runs the Nissan team. Peter Brock running down the straight and being watched very keenly in the pit by his pit manager, John Harvey, himself a winner of numerous Australian titles, and who will be signalling to him throughout this stage and helping him decide tactics. Here he is with Drew Morphett.
Well, a very interested John Harvey. Gee, Peter got a great start, didn't he?
Well, that was an exceptionally good start, probably one of the best he's done.
Now, he hasn't gone too well this year. 2 failed to finish. Why all of a sudden he improved?
Well, we, after the Simmons Plains race, spent a lot of time developing and testing the car at Calder, knowing that we had both Perth and Adelaide to do, a long way away from home base, and that's obviously paid off because the car's performing very well.
Is there a plan today, or is it just get out in front and keep going?
Well, the plan is to stay out in front as long as he can. The biggest problem that faces us, as faces other Commodore or even Falcon drivers, is the fact that the rear tyre performance will deteriorate as the race progresses. The plan was to build up as big a lead as possible early in the race, if that was possible. It's worked out that way, and I see now that Alan Grice and Alan Moffat are having a dice, which is probably slowing Alan Moffat up somewhat and allowing us to gain a bit of ground. So at this point in the race, it's worked out fine for us. We just hope we can make it to the end.
Brock is in 9th place in the Australian Touring Car Championship on 32 points. George Fury leads on 99, and behind in 2nd place we can see that Alan Grice has taken back 2nd place from Alan Moffat, with George Fury still in 4th position.
Well done, a smoky Alan Grice, whose future in the race may not be very long, as he just puffed a bit of smoke there as he got on the gas for the reverse camber. Peter Brock with some curious signals to his pit that we couldn't work out. On the previous lap, he lapped at the same time. Manson's car, number 48, Roger Manson, Jeff Manson, for a 2nd time, which really doesn't make sense.
4.53 seconds the gap. Peter Brock back to the scrapping trio for second position. And certainly, as John Harvey said, this dice is slowing these three drivers up and giving Peter Brock the break he needs, so desperately needs, to be able to win a round of the Australian Touring Car Championship.
Fury's starting to be alarmed by it too. He doesn't want to finish fourth. That's been his worst result in the championship so far at Sandown. But he had a second at Calder, a third at Symonds Plains, and then at Wanneroo, a second. .5 of a second blanket these three cars.
Brock opens his lead to 5.16 seconds. 0.6 of a second on that lap, as now Moffat slingshots off the bowl, and this slower car, the Andrew Harris car in front, the Ford Falcon, could be a deciding factor in the braking area.
Which Grice realises that he's edging his way to the right. But Moffat's got him, and he won that argument well. Grice was all ready to turn hard right in front of him, and suddenly realised it would have been disastrous. Andrew Harris. Big Falcon, the ex-Alan Jones car, travelling fairly slowly. Grice goes low on the banking. Moffat stays high, and Grice made some ground as he did so. But whether he can translate that as the gap over these three splits to 1.2 now. That's the race order with Fury fourth. Gauges in George Fury's car, which he lost a left rear there, but Grice can't tag Moffat any longer, so Fury will start to think about it.
And Moffat starts to pull back Brock now from 5.16 2 laps ago. The gap is down to 4.79.
Yes, the gauges in Fury's car. He has differential engine and transmission temperature gauges, exhaust gas temperature, which is quite critical in the car, and believe it or not, that gauge will read to over 1,000 degrees Celsius, with 960 being the critical quantity. If it gets to that level, then Fury has either to slow or to richen the mixture up slightly. He's got the ability to do that with a knob in the compartment and just lower exhaust temperatures, because it's, as he locks again, that it's that exhaust temperature that's a real problem to the turbo in the Bluebird engine. Spinning at 100,000 revs a minute with enormous temperatures passing over the little turbine blades that are spun up by the exhaust gases, turning another turbine that brings the mixture into the engine under pressure, therefore giving it much greater performance than more than 1.8 litre four-cylinder motor. Grice back with Moffat. How did he do it? Fury running to the outside, delighted to see them scrapping, but Fury with his own problems. And he's got Moffat. That was three abreast, and I don't know how any of them did it, and Fury loved it. Brilliant stuff. And that is a continuing turn, that section of track. Well done, everybody. Clean, hard racing, and good stuff, the rally driver. Now lying second. Oh. Had to gain our breath a little bit on that one. Grice sort of probably still thinking to himself, what did I do wrong? I had Moffat there. And pit crews will now be rather surprised when they see this order. And Fury will be very keen. Let's have a look at it. Look at it. Moffat was leading the front, locked up, went wide, Grice underneath. Grice then got crossed up trying to stay off him. That was what gave Fury his chance. He came right across Moffat's bows, could not help it, wasn't intentional. Moffat tried to get right of him and down the clean inside run, but Fury said, I'm there. Next time you're in close company, a metre or two from cars in traffic at 50 or 60 kilometres an hour, and you think you're close, just think back to that situation at very high speed indeed. But Fury, with a brake locking problem, it hasn't been common to the car, but will not please him at this stage. The gap from Brock to Fury is 5.4 seconds. Moffat a little way behind, and his team manager, Alan Horsley, is down with Drew Morphett.
Alan, you got a little bit behind Peter Brock, and now also George Fury's got you. Is it going to plan for you?
It's not exactly going to plan, but as the tank lightens up, I think we'll move up closer to them. Peter may be a little far away, but I think we can get the Datsun.
Yeah, well, Brock made an amazing start. Did that surprise you?
Oh, no, Peter's a professional, and he can always get off the line well.
And Alan Moffat so often comes from behind to win it. That was always going to be a plan? Just went a little bit...
Well, yes, we're not making a pit stop. But when that tank lightens off, you know, we'll start increasing our lap speeds.
Right. I know you're a bit nervy in the pits, so I'll let you go back.
Thanks very much.
Half distance, and Peter Brock holds a 5.41 second lead over George Fury as Alan Moffat comes down the outside now, challenging at the end of the main straight.
Goes to second. Fury third. Grice fourth. So Commodore's 1 and 4, Mazda second, Nissan Bluebird third, and behind that collection is Dick Johnson, the Falcon 17, and then the Harrop Cullen Commodore number 22, sixth, followed then in 38 by Bernie Stack Commodore.
And again, that smoke from Fury's car. He is really punishing the tyres on the left-hand side of his vehicle, and it could have dire consequences for him later in the race.
I think he's got the brake balance a little bit more inclined as he goes wide and tempts Alan Grice and comes in very late on the banking just to hold Grice out. He's got the brake balance too much to the rear, a little bit like he might like to have it in rallies to help get the tail of the car out. And in fact, Howard Marsden was telling me yesterday, George Fury used to drive his rally car and set it up with more oversteer than any other car as Grice goes back to third, question mark, and he does. And Fury, no, Grice will hold him, taking the inside to the next corner. If it had been a right-hander, Fury would have had him. So, plenty of mixing there, and Grice far from tired of arguing. The series leader having to get into this argument too. He's been able to stay out of a lot of the intense dicing, Fury, by dint of consistency. He's one of only 2 people to have finished all rounds and the only car driver combination to have done the full lap distance of every race. And so, with the point scores, points that he's been getting, plus the fact that he gets more points in running in an under 3 litre car than any of the cars against which he's scrapping at the moment, he hasn't had to argue too hard. But now, for instance, if Alan Moffat were able to attack Peter Brock, then you'd see a situation where Moffat first would get 25 and Fury, let's say third, would get 24 or less if he came further back. So suddenly he's in a position of dropping points for Moffat, which he hasn't previously been in the series. And so he has to keep a keen eye on Moffat's position in the field as well as his own. In the 8 rounds, they drop 1. Fury at the moment has 99 points. His worst finish, 21 from 4th at Sandown. There's the situation. Alan Moffat running second with 73. If Fury were to count only 3 rounds, as all the drivers below are doing, Harrington, actually. Harrington's the other one that's had 4 finishes. Then he would be on 78 points, only 5 in front of Moffat. And if Moffat picks up a point or two this one, well, then it gets even closer. And that's a much widening gap. Between Moffat second, Grice third, Fury fourth, and the race leader, Peter Brock, whose lead over Moffat now in second place is nearly 5 seconds, but it's decreasing. It's about 4.9, so Moffat's hauled in about half a second despite all the frenzy of that scrap with Grice and Fury. So Peter Brock, 16 laps of conservatism, of looking after tyres, being sympathetic with brakes, trying to hold out the aggressors from behind. Can he do it? He failed at Wanneroo, and he doesn't like failing. He doesn't like driver error. The error very rarely makes them. Took time off, went fishing after Wanneroo. Didn't get here till 10 a.m. yesterday. Barely made it. Had to have a midnight flight Perth to Melbourne. Then a flight back to Adelaide early in the morning. They booked a motel at Melbourne Airport for only a few hours. And a lot of the other teams thought this indicated a non-serious approach from Peter Brock. But I think they underestimate the man who's won 6 Bathurst Enduros and 3 Australian Touring Car Championships.
The gap now, 4.33 seconds. Moffat holding him in by more than half a second a lap. Brock, 4.33 seconds ahead of Alan Moffat. Alan Grice in third position, narrowly ahead of George Fury there in car 55, the turbocharged Nissan Bluebird. And Jim Keogh there, 1 lap behind in the newly sponsored Toshiba Commodore. Same people who sponsor the Yamaha racing team in motorcycling.
In fact, we've got a very distinguished field here today. There are 5 Australian title holders in the field. Peter Brock, Alan Grice, Dick Johnson, Alan Moffat and George Fury all have won Australian titles in various categories. Between them, they've won 14 titles and 11 Bathurst long-distance races.
3.93 seconds the gap. Alan Moffat takes another 0.4 of a second off Peter Brock. There are 26 laps down. There are 14 remaining.
The result last year was interesting. Moffat had the race seemingly wrapped up when he got caught up with Wilmington. Lapping him, they touched and he went off. And so the lead was inherited then and victory taken by Dick Johnson, Peter Brock, Alan Brown, Kevin Bartlett, Parsons and Stephen Harrington. When they came back in December for the endurance race here as part of the Endurance Championship, which was won by Nissan, it was won by Moffat from Brock, Murray Carter and Fred Gibson fourth after George Fury had mechanical trouble. Andrew Harris being lapped again.
3 lapped cars between Peter Brock and Alan Moffat. Moffat slams down the main straight, 2.83 seconds behind Peter Brock. That lap, he's taken a full second off Peter Brock. There are 13 laps remaining.
And Grice losing ground to Moffat and Fury losing ground to Grice. But this man making ground, as he always seems to do late in the race, to the race leader, 05, Marlborough Holden dealer team lead driver, Peter Brock.
Last year, while lapping slower traffic, Alan Moffat was forced off the track and it cost him his win in this event, so he's got to be very careful of lap traffic.
Bernie Stack just making Moffat run the long way round him. 3.43 the gap.
Back to Moffat, so the gap opens as Moffat wends his way through the lap traffic. And as Brock obviously responds to the challenge.
12 laps to the finish. But before that, will we see a replay as we watch Dick Johnson of the dramatic final lap at Wanneroo only a week ago?
Johnson in 5th position. And while the race is fast and furious on the track, the lobbying off the track this weekend has been equally pacey as drivers have pushed the Confederation of Australian Motorsports for relaxations of the rules to allow them to gain advantage over each other. And John Keefe, the executive director of CAMS, has tried to show the wisdom of Solomon by offering opportunities to each of the drivers, which will keep the field closely packed. Peter Brock, for example, desperately wants 12-inch wide rear tyres on the back of his car, wheels rather, on the back of his car. At the moment he's allowed only 10s. His rear tyres do go off very quickly on 10-inch wheels, and he feels that the 12-inch wheels will really make a difference. Alan Moffat wants a more powerful engine. George Fury wants a better built turbocharger that will allow him greater reliability, although he doesn't really seem to have a reliability problem to date.
The situation with the Commodores and Falcons is they're running not just with their 10-inch rear wheels, but that they're the same width as the rear wheels on the 20% lighter Bluebirds and Mazda RX-7. Two seconds now, the gap. That man to the pursuer, the hunter, Alan Moffat.
"30 laps down, 10 to go. Peter Brock in the lead, but tenuously from Alan Moffat, with Grice in a frustrating 3rd position. Grice is a man who loves to make his break from the start, and he's let first Brock and then Moffat get away from him. Moffat now locking wheels, as you can see, as he comes so close to Peter Brock.
So it's Commodore battles Mazda. He gets ever closer. Brock against Moffat, and appropriately Cigarette Company against Cigarette Company.
0.98 of a second, and you can put the watches away from here on in, because it's a case of visual distance. And now the two men who are regarded as being the best touring car drivers in Australia begin a battle, a 10-lap sprint, a 9-lap sprint to the finish.
Grice is still 3rd, Fury still 4th, Johnson still 5th, and the Cullen Commodore still 6th.
Giving Peter Brock very little opportunity to get over, although Brock tries, and by giving Moffat that small nudge, serves notice on him.
This is the point that Moffat was making to me yesterday when I said, with the sort of lap time you've got, you should be able to run away from them. He said, down that straight, they are so much quicker than I am that it's very hard for me to do much at in the other areas, particularly if they hold me up when I run onto the straight, the area where I need some help. And if they knock my lap time down in the sections that suit me, then I won't be anywhere near my lap time.
.91 seconds the gap from these two. Back to Alan Grice, then 3.98 seconds back to George Fury. And like a Formula V race, all over the track now as Brock tries to break Moffat out of his slipstream. Moffat higher and will go for the slingshot through the corner. Brock hard braking there, trying to force Moffat off his tail. That was deliberate. Fastest lap so far, 58.1 seconds for Peter Brock, 0.9 of a second under his lap record. Six laps at the end of this lap remaining. There's Harvey, John Harvey, the Marlborough Holden dealer team manager and driver of the number 2 car in the long distance races later this year, and this time Moffat again pulls out of the slipstream and covers Brock down the straight this time, and Brock doesn't have an answer. Yes, he does.
The situation as they lie in the point score at the moment, or in the order on the track at the moment, would have Fury 120 points, Moffat 96 if he finishes where he is now, 98 if he comes forward one spot, Johnson 70, Grice 70, and Brock if he finishes where he is at the moment, 57. Now if Fury then drops his worst score because he can't count all, then he takes 21 off and he comes back to 99. So if Moffat wins this and Fury stays where he is and Brock finishes ahead of Fury, there would be 1 point dropping to one of Fury's round between Moffat and Fury, but Fury's still in the lead.
5 laps remaining.
Five laps, 5 minutes, 12 kilometres, 150 kilometres an hour average speed. Two very determined and capable racing drivers. 6 wins at Bathurst for Brock, 4 for Moffat, 5 Australian Touring Car Championships for Moffat, the man who started racing in a TR2 Triumph sports car. Peter Brock in a supercharged Austin A35 with a Holden engine. Modest beginnings for both. But now, big business, professional driving. 4 remaining when they run off the bowl. Surely Brock won't make the error he made at Wanneroo.
Warren Cullen is the driver in front in the Holden Commodore. They should reach him about the braking area, maybe just a little bit later in the corner.
Peter Brock, 5 litres, 390 horsepower, 1,232 kilos of motor car to fling around and keep under control. Alan Moffat, 1,002 kilos, 270 horsepower, a little twin-chamber engine that revs at up to 10,000 revs, which were designed by Mr. Felix Wankel. Can actually be, if you don't unsettle the car too much there, can be quite a bit of a help onto the line. Just kicking it across towards the other apex, and that is almost an S-bend. 3 laps remain.
Moffat this time really going for the slingshot, has gone so high on the bowl and slams down onto the main straight.
Coming up to car 22, Harrop Cullen Commodore. Brock surges away. Brock with very disappointing results so far in the series. Qualified pole at Sandown and Wanneroo. Second at Sandown, but then 9th at Wanneroo. Retired from both Simmons Plains and Calder. So a measly 32 points at this moment. Fairly desperate time now for Alan Moffat, a time that at Sandown, when he was doing it on Alan Grice, he stretched the car so hard it broke an axle 4 laps from the end. This circuit's not like that, it's pretty smooth, but he's got to pull a bit of magic now, and as Brock got himself box there, but the camera, as you can see, was shortening it greatly, and Brock's got it well covered there. Coming up to pass the car in 6th position. You can believe that. They're on their 39th. They've been racing for 38 minutes, 10 seconds.
John wants him out of the way, waving, flashing his lights. Cullen Brock play that easily.
And this has worked.
Oh, Brock having to lock up everything to miss Cullen.
That was bad by Cullen. Brock should have been in, Cullen should have been out of the way. And Brock will be angry. Now Brock says, you must let me through.
Glenn Dexter starter gives the sign. They're on their last lap. Moffat falling back from it.
There'll be some desperate stuff breaking for the S's, some closing through here, and that worked beautifully by Brock, and it should really have worked back there on the entry to the bowl. But that's where Moffat will have to nip quickly through the S's and try one there. Then the bowl is the last opportunity. But Brock, I think, has got the measure today. And he'll be very jubilant, because with budget allegedly running low in the team, a lot of pressure from sponsors, and it's still not over, this 5th round of the Australian Touring Car Championship. Peter Brock leading into the final corner from Alan Moffat. Running to the flag now, and the V8 should be good enough.
So close.
But Moffat pulled very nearly a miracle.
Brock played, my goodness, they were side by side.
We're waiting the decision, quite frankly. Fury coming in 4th. Grice finished 3rd. Johnson should finish 5th. In car number 17 as Brock goes on his slowing down lap, and then lapped the Commodore 22.
And that's it. The judge of fact has given it to Peter Brock, but it was so close. There wouldn't have been 2/100ths of a tenth of a second in it. 2/100ths of a second in it, really.
So then, to pick up that point score situation, that will leave Fury in the lead with 120, from Moffat on 96. Johnson and Grice equal on 70. Peter Brock up to 57. And as I say, if you drop Fury's worst score, which ultimately he'll have to do, you come back to 99. Moffat only 3 points behind him. The encouraging thing about all this great racing, which we've seen in the 5 rounds of the Australian Touring Car Championship, is that the next round, the 6th, is at Surfers Paradise in 2 weeks' time. It's just a 2-week gap, that's the middle of May, to the end of May, to the 7th round at Oran Park, and 3 weeks then to the 18th, 19th of June, the final round at Lakeside, Queensland, all of which, of course, will be covered by ABC Sport.
And wasn't it nice then to see Alan Moffat's pit crew come up and congratulate Peter Brock? To say that it's been tense in the pits between the Moffat team and the Brock team, and indeed everyone else in the race, would be an understatement. And to see the congratulations heartily given from the Peterson-Syverson team to the Marlborough team is very good.
A greatly relieved crew that will be, the Marlborough Holden dealer team, because it has not been a very shiny year for them, but there was a lot of sponsor and promotional backing in the pit area here today, seeing the business side of motor racing, and the Marlborough people that were here will be delighted to have seen that result. But neither will Stuyvesant be upset, although Peter Brock is the man who's done it today for his first victory in the 5 rounds of the Australian Touring Car Championship, and let's now hear from him.
Well, Brocky, it's been a while since you've been in the winner's circle.
It has indeed. Actually, I have to hark back to a very minor race in Bob Jane's Monza in February this year, actually. Yes, it has been a while.
And by about the paint on the bumper bar.
Yeah, today. Well, as a matter of fact, I went across the line looking at Alan's car and mine. I thought, well, I think my bumper bar's a bit further out than his is. I think I might have just sneaked in there.
It was a part of the circuit where he was trying to get you every time.
Yeah.
When you had the room up the straight, you could get away. But
Yeah, I could make a bit of room on him, but I had to concentrate on trying to slow him down. So once he got behind me, I was able to control his speed out of the corner to a certain extent, but his speed into the corner is so fast that I had to block him. It's as simple as that. Yeah.
And obviously you were expecting it. That was his last dash at it.
Oh, yeah, I'd saved my tyres for a last lap effort, and he nudged me a couple of times, nothing major. I mean, it was just good, close racing, and I must congratulate Alan too. He's an excellent bloke to race against.
As a matter of fact, I was standing about 80 metres behind the start-finish line, and you were second when you went past me.
Yeah, that's right. I had to line her up and boot it, but I was quite confident that I had the legs on him. I saw him out there, and I thought, not a good place to be, Al.
If you'd been beaten, would you have been a bit dirty on some of the other drivers? You were being held up, I thought.
Oh, no, I don't think so. It's part of the action. I mean, you take your chances in racing, and it's like slow drivers at Bathurst. I always think that it's an added difficulty. It's a bit like a high diver, and he says, ride two and a half somersaults with Pike. I mean, it just makes it more difficult for all drivers. No, I simply had a problem there about the last 15 laps of the tyres just losing their grip rapidly, and watching Alan creeping up and up, and trying my best to keep the car intact, to keep it from sliding too much.
It's got to be the classic tortoise and hare race.
Yes.
Because as your tyres wear, his tank is getting more empty, and...
Well, I don't know about his tank. He just kept on the same lap times he was doing at the beginning of the race. I started off at 58.2. I think I saw the boys hang at a time, which would be a new lap record, I think. And towards the end there, I was doing 60.1, so I'm falling off 2 seconds a lap around here. Alan started off about 59 dead and finished up at about 59 dead.
We talked to John Harvey during the race. You've worked a lot on the car after a bit of a slow start to the season.
Yes, we have, and I must congratulate the boys for doing a fabulous job this week. I took the week off to get my brain intact.
Bit of fishing?
Bit of fish. In WA, and lobbed here, and I honestly haven't changed a thing on the car. It was absolutely beautiful. So I think sometimes a fresh brain's as good as a fresh car.
And Pete, I heard your interview on the PA before the race started, and you said, well, Collingwood won yesterday, so it might be a good one.
Make it a good double. Make it a good double. Yeah, good week, actually, all round. 2 wins for Collingwood, 1 for Brock.
Well, what about the rest of the season?
What, for Collingwood or Brock?
Well, let's talk about motor racing.
Yep.
You're too far behind already?
Oh, yes, for these races. I don't think there's any way any of us are going to catch George Fury and the Nissan because of the way the points is structured. But I'm not particularly perturbed about that. I'm far more interested in trying to get our act together for the Castrol 400 at Sandown and, of course, the James Hardy 1000. They're the grand final of what it's all about, and, this is homework.
Grand final for Brock, grand final for Collingwood?
Who knows?
Good on you, Pete. Well done.
Thanks.
Those who have enjoyed the last 2 weekends of the Australian Touring Car Championship from Wanneroo and here from Adelaide Raceway will be pleased to know that in only 2 weeks' time we have round 6 from Surfers on ABC Sport, to be followed 2 weeks later, 28th, 29th of May, by round 7 from Oran Park, and then the final round 3 weeks after that from Lakeside. But in the meantime, I'm sure you're very interested to hear from the man who's provided so much excitement throughout the series, generally coming from behind, the drawl of the bespectacled 44-year-old Alan Moffat.
Never goes to plan when you get knocked around by somebody else. I didn't think Grice was driving particularly, not that we expect him to be gentlemanly, but he certainly wasn't very sporting, and that allowed Peter to get away, and you can't give away anything in this business. If you're going to win, you've got to be competitive every lap. And while I was sort of fending and looking after my life out there, Peter got away, and there just weren't enough laps in the race for me to whittle him away. We didn't run the plan we did in Perth, and on the opening laps I'm a little bit slower because of the gas load, and that gave Grice a chance to come up and play ping pong with me, and I think I was very fortunate even to stay in the race.
Peter Brock himself said some nice things about you. Now, are you that much good friends, Brock and Moffat? I mean,
well, let's put it this way. We don't meet socially, but we're not, I wouldn't think, too antagonistic. That's more than I can say for the other fellow.
They're pretty close to the wall coming towards the finish
but
line.
Peter doesn't cut me off when I get up alongside him, and he doesn't take a slice out of my rear quarter panel when I'm upside him. He's a professional driver. I think the other fellow's got a lot to learn, if you want to know the truth.
When you got close to Peter with about 4 laps to go. Did you think you had him covered then?
Well, I had him covered. I was just hoping for a brake lock-up or maybe go a little bit lower. But, you know, we've got such a small engine. I can't surge by them. I have to slingshot myself by them. And he can make a mistake. He can dictate the race as he did. I imagine we were going about 3 seconds slower than we should have been going. And I can't drive over their roofs. I can't even touch them. If I touch them, I'm too vulnerable. It's just so fragile, such a little thing. We've got to get in front, and that's the only chance I've got. But on the opening laps with the other shenanigans, I didn't have an opportunity to do that.
Well, this is the situation after 5 rounds of this year's Australian Touring Car Championship, the 24th in the series, that's been dominated by Ford. 5 victories to Ford Mustang and Ford Falcon, but it's certainly not going to be a Ford year this year. It's got to be between George Fury, Nissan Bluebird Turbo, 120 points, but if this championship were to stop now, 1 to drop, bringing him back to 99, or Alan Moffat in the Peter Stuyvesant Wankel engine Mazda RX-7 on 96. Dick Johnson back up to 3rd place, equal with Alan Grice, but the car really very hard to sustain a race-winning pace with. Peter Brock also pulling himself back up, but an almost impossible task without some enormous luck on his side to haul in the 2 Japanese cars up front. Consistency from Harrington, Cullen and others. So that's the situation. And it's certainly been a most interesting series up till now, and we've told you that we'll be covering the final 3 rounds on ABC Sport. And it certainly should be most entertaining, because Alan Moffat, you heard him say there, has a lot of trouble getting past a fast car in a straight line. 270 horsepower in his car to 390 from, say, a Holden Commodore, and even more than that from a 5.7 litre Falcon. But on the other hand, a very handy car under brakes and a very reliable car. The motors in those cars, in the Mazda, just go on forever and do an enormous number of races, much more so than most of the other cars. So as we wind up, let's go down now to Drew Morphett.
And in fact, the last meeting here for bikes was so close at the Adelaide International Raceway. Our thanks to the drivers for the entertainment, Will Hagon and John Smailes, Drew Morphett at Adelaide for ABC Sport.